Hello and good evening, everyone. This is Nayanika Datta from the Balipara Foundation, and today I am truly humbled to welcome you all to the fifth edition of the Naturenomics Digital Dialogues. This year's theme is Back to Green Basics, where we've tried to have conversations centering the fundamental basics of environment like forest, water, land, and communities. We've tried to see through these dialogues the impacts that change has had on these elements and in what capacity can we drive climate action in the region. And through these dialogues, like I said, we have tried to engage stakeholders, youth experts from across the region, and people who have been contributing in this field. And thank you so much for joining in today, everyone. Now I welcome you all to the last session of the series, and that is on sustainable land and waste management. Now I think I can hand it over to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Nainika. Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome again to this session on Naturenomics Dialogues, hosted by the Balipara Foundation. Just to give a brief introduction about myself, I'll be your moderator for today. My name is Udevir Guha Sarkar, and I am an Environmental Defense Fund's Climate Corps Fellow. With my expertise in the space of sustainable development and climate adaptation, and I've had my experiences with system services, sustainable policy, as well as circular economy development initiatives in that space. But anyways, moving the spotlight away from me, and I would like to move to the topic and our really great panel of speakers that we have today. So today's topic is on integrating sustainable land and waste management across diverse ecosystems, preserving an ecological balance, and in particular balancing the fine lines of biodiversity enhancement and community well-being has become an increasingly vital and crucial step and preserving this balance lies crucially upon taking forward sustainable land management. However, ecological landscapes, which would include wetlands, grasslands, and not only the rural spaces but also peripheral urban spaces, are becoming increasingly vulnerable to mismanagement. What more concerning would be that these areas are being compromised and in many cases becoming spaces of waste collection. And also, you can take poor food systems spaces and also places of overgrazing, for example, in that case. In pursuit of a sustainable future for these ecological landscapes, understanding the intersection of effective land and waste management is critical, and both by integrating sustainable land management practices as well as community-based involvement. And for this session today, we have an excellent and really distinguished set of panelists today. I would like to introduce our panelists. Our first speaker is Dr. Priyadarshini Karve. Dr. Priyadarshini is an innovator in renewable energy and has over 20 years of experience developing biomass cooking devices to reduce firewood dependence in rural areas. In 2005, she founded some Envirotech, offering energy-efficient household devices and also Samuchit carbon footprint calculator for urban Indians. Active in international renewable energy organizations, she has led numerous projects in research, technology dissemination, and policy advocacy. Dr. Karve is also a visiting faculty member at the Symbiosis International University in Pune, teaching sustainable development and climate change. Her accolades include the World Technology Award, the Sahyadri Hirkani Award, and Pune's Pride Award for Innovation. Our next speaker is Itisha Sera. Itisha is a co-founder of the Northeast Waste Collective, which is a pioneering initiative aimed at addressing the pressing challenges of the Northeast. As a dedicated environmentalist, she has revolutionized waste management in the region by promoting recycling, composting, and responsible waste disposal. Under her leadership, the organization has implemented innovative solutions to reduce environmental impact. And beyond waste management, Tisha actively engages with local communities, educating and empowering them to adopt to sustainable practices. Her efforts have earned her the recognition and accolades for her commitment to environmental conservation and community involvement. And with an extensive experience in sustainable practices, Itisha continues to lead the charge for a cleaner, greener Northeast. Our final speaker for today is Karan Singhal. Karan is a program associate at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, CEW, New Delhi, where he contributes to the Sustainable Food Systems team. His research supports the Food and Land Use Coalition project on sustainable and regenerate through policy interventions and bottom-up informed data and pilots. Previously, Karan worked at the Nudge Institute, designing livelihood programs to increase the incomes of small and marginalized women farmers in Uttar Pradesh through agriculture and livestock interventions. His background in public policy and extensive experience in sustainable food systems drive his commitment to creating impactful solutions for the environment and socio-economic well-being of communities. Once again, I will thank all our speakers today, and I bet our audience is going to have a really, really interesting time listening to your insights and experiences. Just to begin with, we'll begin with a little bit of a context setting. We'll try to keep this conversation as flowing as possible. So just to begin with a little bit of a context setting, I will ask the first question to our panelists, and that would be: could you provide some examples from your research or your field experiences of successful sustainable land management initiatives? And additionally to this, adding on to this question, how have they contributed to the broader goals such as improved community resilience and environmental sustainability? For this, maybe we could have Dr. Priya to begin and start us off with. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. I haven't personally worked in the field of agriculture. I sort of got into it more from the perspective of what do we do with all the biomass waste that is being generated. But as the solutions that I have promoted, I work with various organizations across India, both in urban and rural context. I think this is we have to look at it from both perspective, because even in cities there is this growing movement of urban farming, and in a way it's a good thing, because the way the land use has changed, we have been shrinking the space available for agriculture and building cities there. So in a way it's a moral responsibility of urban people to use their terraces and any open space available for also contributing towards food security. And there this whole issue of land management becomes very, very important, because of smaller area that are available. And it is in a way urban farming provides a solution to the problem of urban organic waste generation, so that waste can be sort of used for growing food. So that's one aspect of it. In the rural context, I feel that mostly the sustainable agriculture discourse has focused on water management and putting the biomass back into the soil in the form of compost and so on. But I think it's important to look at all the inputs that go in, even the sunlight, which is an important input for agriculture. How do we maximize the use of the available sunlight? There are some interesting technological innovations which several people have experimented with. So that's also something which doesn't get talked about a lot, but is an important part. Integrated pest management, even selection of crops in line with the changing climatic conditions. So it has to be a holistic view which is focused on enhancing incomes for the farmers, and of course the overall food production with more efficient use of all the resources that go into making agriculture happen. So that's how we should look at it accordingly.
Thank you, Dr. Priya. Thank you for your insights. And how about Karan? Would you like to go and discuss about your research and field experiences on this topic?
Yes, thank you. So just a little background. Most of my research and work has been directly with food systems. And as we know that, I think what Dr. Priya mentioned about maximizing the utilization of all resources becomes critical. But we have to also balance, the challenge remains in balancing our food security with our conservation of our, especially ecologically sensitive lands, like you mentioned, like grasslands, wetlands, peatlands, etc. So we have to also understand that different intervention, the emerging trends need to integrate the different sustainable development goals into their plans. So your Ministry of Agriculture needs to be speaking to the Ministry of Environment to understand how the National Green India Mission needs to work to ensure that food security is not threatened, while at the same time those forests are protected. So as we know that most of the pressure from either infrastructure, urbanization, or agriculture is coming onto these ecological sensitive areas. So I think one emerging trend that we are seeing, at least at the local level, but needs to be scaled, is decentralization on the governance of our lands. So what we really need to do is understand that what are the local communities' needs and are they being heard and met? Like on paper, we have the PISA Act, the Community Forest Rights Act, and all of those. But on the ground, often those fail to be implemented or fail to be enforced, both due to lack of maybe capacity and awareness at the local community level and lack of political will and interest at the state or national level. So those are the emerging trends I feel are emerging in some states, especially in some tribal areas, but need to be scaled to other areas to ensure that forest conservation, grassland conservation is balanced with food security needs for the country. So I'll pause here and we can talk about individual interventions and practices as we move on.
Thank you, Karan, and thank you for highlighting especially the grassroots aspect of it. And then talking about grassroots aspect, I think our next speaker, Etisha, you could really elaborate as well on your experiences in this space as well. Yeah.
Hi everyone. So I would like to come in from the waste management angle and how you can say managing waste can also lead to sustainable land management. Like you see everywhere today, be it rural, urban, or peri-urban, you have vast stretches of land just being converted into dumping grounds. So if we are able to manage waste responsibly, we will also be able to save a lot of land that is now getting converted to these so-called landfills. They are not even landfills; they are actually dump sites. India doesn't really have a properly sanitary engineered landfill. In fact, the country has about 3,100 dump sites, and so that's like the dark underbelly of the bustling and glittering cities. And it's not just cities now that have these landfills, but even the quaint, silent, beautiful valleys and villages in the remote mountain ecosystems today. Every village will also have a dump site. So yeah, from my personal experience, like from what we are trying to do here in Sangti, I think Sangti will be the only village in Arunachal Pradesh where you wouldn't see a dump site. And how we have been able to achieve this is through a community-led waste management system. So source segregation is the key. The key is the simplest act actually, that you simply need to segregate your waste at source. And if you do that, then the processes that follow becomes possible. So in Sangti, for example, every household segregates its waste into wet and dry. And then we have integrated more than 100 self-help group women who further segregate the dry waste into multiple categories of recyclables. And all of it then goes out for recycling. And this is a completely community-led model. And we have been we have only empowered the community, and there has been no support from no external financial support, be it from the government or be it from any CSR, because this is the problem with the remote villages here, lack of access to government funds, lack of access to CSR funds. Yeah, so I think this could also be one way of looking at sustainable land management, like managing waste to protect your land.
Thank you, Etisha, and especially thank you for highlighting the whole community-led initiatives aspect, which is, I think, is critical for land management in this space. Moving on to the next question, and I think I would direct this to Karan to begin with. So, how do sustainable food practices, especially such as agroforestry or permaculture, help in minimizing the food waste and enhancing resource efficiency? And adding to this question, like how would the circular economy play in sustainable food systems in this space? Could you elaborate? Could you maybe speak on this in this space?
Sure, thank you. I'll take the question in two parts. I'll first take the question on agroforestry and then on circular economy. So before I address agroforestry and permaculture, I'd like to double down on the points that Dr. Priya mentioned as what are the resources that we are speaking about here. So let's start with land. Land as of 2020, 32% of India's land is degraded, of which 25% is undergoing desertification. Over and above this, we have increasing pressure on land, especially from infrastructure and agriculture on forests, wetlands, etc. So land becomes, as the topic of the conversation today, becomes the most critical resource to conserve and efficiently use. Land, we come to soil. India's soil organic carbon, I think most of us know, has reduced from 1% to almost 0.3% over the last 60 years, and which, as per the recommended levels, it should be almost 1.5%. Then we have water. As per a CW study, 11 out of the 15 major river basins will be under water stress by next year, and our more and more lands are therefore becoming drought prone as we in the summer season. Then we have imbalanced use of fertilizer, which further cause degradation, desertification, increased pest attack, and acidification of our lands. And then we have an increasing number of youth moving towards cities, and therefore a shortage of labor for agriculture in our hinterlands. So, and obviously, then we keep seeing news every now and then of pesticide residue in our foods because of increased use of pesticides. So we have these multiple challenges across all our resources that need to be solved for. And therefore, agroforestry has been touted as one of those promising permaculture which can solve for almost all of these issues. So agroforestry, for those who may not know, is the integration of trees, crops, and livestock in different forms on the same piece of land. This can be in either rotational form or at the same time. India is a diverse country which has approximately 14 agroecological zones. And as some of you may know, there are 20 different types of agroforestry systems: silvipastures, silvopastures, alley cropping, and many others, which are actually spread across these 14 EEZs. So when we look at agroforestry as an intervention to improve resource efficiency for all of these resources, we should also keep in mind that each of the agroforestry systems should be applied in a context-specific manner. Some agroforestry systems are very suited to restoration of degraded lands like alley cropping or afforestation on sloped lands, while some are very suitable for increasing farmer incomes on large lands, and some are very suitable for against climate protection, like shelter belts against in windy areas to protect crops. So while implementing these interventions, please keep in mind that they should be context specific. Now, how does agroforestry really solve for this resource efficiency? So for example, what agroforestry does is the roots of the trees that are either planted on the boundary or in between crops help retain the water and the moisture in the soil and also prevent erosion, therefore reducing the need of water in the soil. And also the fixation of the nitrogen by the roots can also reduce the need of fertilizer. Similarly, naturally, when you integrate trees on farms, they reduce the need of pesticides, because first it attracts birds, right? And those eat the pests. And what happens is, if you look at pest attacks are most common in areas which are dominated by monoculture. You see Indo-Gangetic Plain or areas of even Australia and all of these places, which suddenly have an increase in temperature, which attract locusts, and they then completely destroy those lands. As soon as you diversify your lands, either via trees or via permaculture, what happens is insects are not naturally a species which don't check out the buffet as humans do, right? They just go on one plant and then kind of then attack the entire thing. So that acts as a natural pest reducer. And then, as I mentioned earlier, trees that act as natural barriers against overgrazing or wildlife human conflict. Balipara has very good examples of these models that they've tried in Assam, and they build resilience against extreme weather events. Overall, while building these ecological functions, it also provides a sustained source of income and provides an alternative, more sustainable source for non-timber forest produce like bamboo, etc., which can be used in construction, packaging, and therefore reducing the need of waste at source. So as soon as you're switching out bamboo for plastic, you're reducing waste at source. So inherently it becomes more resource efficient and all of that. Permaculture is a more sophisticated way of looking at agroforestry, so I won't get into too much details of that. But a very interesting example from a permaculture farm I visited was that how you have DAP, which is the most common fertilizer used. So you get nitrogen from leguminous plants and trees, you get phosphorus from bird droppings, and you get potassium from decomposed litter. And the mulching helps reduce weeding, and therefore you reduce your fertilizer use, you reduce the need of labor, which is most used for weeding. So permaculture and agroforestry by design are resource efficient because they integrate the natural biological systems to improve resource efficiency and give better incomes. I think, and then how we implement them, then I think maybe people who work with communities directly can probably elaborate on that. But that's what I would like to pause here. And if any other panelist wants to come in and add to that, they can come in.
I mean, especially what you've highlighted about each agroforestry system should be applied to context specific is so important. I mean, in the case of how certain carbon projects are taken up, and actually some of them are really detrimental when they're put out of context. It's clearly been seen about that. Yes, any other of the panelists, if they all want to also jump into this, before we move into the next question, if you all want to add anything to this, what Karan has elaborated on.
Just to add, from the I don't know much about permaculture, but something that really intrigues me. But one simple thing that I've understood is it promotes the idea of growing and serving locally. So when you are growing and serving locally, you're automatically making the whole thing resource efficient, because you're cutting down energy on storage, you're cutting down energy and resources that is used for transportation of food from one place to another. And all of this, I think, in turn also helps in resilience. Humans are more resilient if they are able to have local seasonal food, and which are much more nutrient dense than the chemically grown food. So yeah, that is like a simple understanding that I thought I'd like to add from resource efficiency point of view.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry, Dr. Priya, if you want to come
Yeah,
in.
just one point. I mean, in the sense that permaculture also brings in people living in the same space where you are growing your food and you also have a natural ecosystem. So we have sort of created this artificial division between the towns and villages and cities and the land where we grow food and where we have natural ecosystem. Permaculture sort of brings everything together, mixes it all up, which is perhaps the right way forward for sustainability in general. I mean, going even beyond food security.
Thank you, Tisha and Dr. Priya. All right, so then we
I'll
can move on to sorry, Karan, if you have anything else to add to
So
this.
I did not address the circular economy questions. Should I just touch upon that, or
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah, absolutely.
so I mean, your question is that what is the role of circular economy in food systems, and how can it reduce food waste print? So just a little bit of unfortunate fact is that 74 million tons of food each year is wasted in India as per the UNEP report, and that equals to approximately 22% of India's food grain output and approximately 13% of our horticulture output. And most of it is lost, almost 40-50% of it is lost between harvesting and consumption. So in the value chain itself. And while we require infrastructural interventions like better cold chain, better transportation, and all of that, I think Hitisha already covered the point that I wanted to cover about essentially focusing on local and seasonal produce, which is the basic principle in creating circular economies. Right now, our food comes from all over the country and often out of season, right? You should, I mean, if you go back 40-50 years, you would not see unseasonal produce in winters, and you would have all your gourds in your summers, right? But as our food systems, wanted to address food security, they often created longer value chains at the cost of waste, and that waste inherently creates more methane emissions from the decomposition of that waste in the dump sites. So creating those local seasonal produce, which is shorter value chains, can create circular economies, and generally practicing regenerative agriculture, which helps restore ecosystems and improve soil fertility. Finally, I think there's an important role of technology. So blockchain technologies like blockchain and creating more supply chain transparency to identify the critical points along the value chain where waste is happening can help us better plan our infrastructure of cold chain and etc., so that we can then reduce the food waste along the supply chain. I think those are and the overarching principle remains that if you want to create a circular economy, we need to focus on local food systems, grow indigenously, consume indigenously, and that can help us move forward sustainably.
Absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely correct. And these wastage as goes on in the value chain, especially, does come at a huge cost for community incomes in that space, as well as the wastage aspect of it. And yes, before we move on, would any of the other panelists want to add to this before we move on? All right, thank you so much. Yes, and so exactly now, setting this context, I would like to bring in to start off with Itisha for this next question. So, Itisha, can you illustrate a few of the best practices from ecosystems that highlight innovative waste management strategies, since the waste comes into your forte, and what lessons can be drawn from these examples, if you could talk about broader application?
I recently came across this. Since in the beginning, in fact, Nanika also mentioned that this is going to, our inputs are going to be part of a report that will talk about the third pole conservation. So I was thinking to give an example of a waste management initiative at the Sagarmatha National Park, which is in the Himalayas in Nepal. So it encompasses many of world's highest peaks, including Mount Everest. So in mountain ecosystems, there are I mean, these are ecologically very fragile ecosystems with a lot of rare and rich biodiversity. And but as we know that there is a push for tourism in all these places, we have this waste problem is only growing. And unlike lowland areas, mountains have their own set of challenges to manage waste. So that's why I think innovation to manage waste in mountain ecosystems becomes even more important. So this example of this initiative at the Sagarmatha National Park. So Sagarmatha National Park, it receives around 80,000 visitors every year, and about 200 tons of waste is generated and left behind every year. So there they came up with something very innovative. So you have these trekkers, right? So what they did was like the main problem was to how to bring the waste back. So they came up with a very innovative model where they involve the tourists or the trekkers in getting the waste back. So they started something called Carry Me Back, which is a crowdsourced waste removal system. So under this initiative, they designed a bag, a very convenient bag that could be attached to your backpack. And there were several collection points. So on your way up, you collect the Carry Me backpack, and then and on your and so there are collection points where you collect the bag which has shredded plastic waste in it worth and it'll amount like 1 kg worth of plastic is what every bag will have. So yeah, on your way back, after once you finish the trek, there's the deposit center where you deposit the bag. So this they tried as a pilot, and now then they started it as a pilot in 2019. They were able to collect 5,000 kgs of waste this way, and now it is a successful model where the tourists help in bringing the waste down, and then the airlines carry the waste to Kathmandu. And what happens after this is even more interesting. So it's a collaboration between Sagarmatha Next, 3 organizations, then Blue Waste to Value. So after the waste reaches Kathmandu, Blue Waste to Value helps it in further segregation and processing. And then comes Moware Design. Moware is Mountain Waste Repurpose, MOWARE. So they then convert the waste into product. So for example, like waste like PET bottles and all are easily recyclable, but the plastic caps of PET bottles, let's say the HDP plastic caps, are hard to recycle. In fact, there is the local recycling market for this HDP bottle caps is not even there. So that required some innovation. So that's where Moware Design started making souvenirs for the tourists to take back. So a lot of plastic waste is now getting converted into souvenirs, like replica of the mountains, replica of Mount Everest, and then the traditional Mani stones, replica of that. So people have this tendency to take back stones, from the natural environment, which is again not a very great thing to do. So instead, they have created these replicas out of waste, and it is something that is really working out well for them. So yeah, this was one interesting example I thought I would cite. So how you can have tourism, but also use the tourists in a way or promote tourism in a way that leaves the place better and not worse.
Thank you, Vitisha. And yes, absolutely. I'm glad you highlighted the whole mountain ecosystem aspect, because it's very evident, and you can clearly see that a lot of indigenous communities there actually are fearing more tourism because of the increasing waste, but at the same time, they do care about their sustenance. And these initiatives that you mentioned, I mean, are really, really, forward thinking and can be really taken forward well. And I would like to have Dr. Priya maybe come into this and speak about this.
Yeah, I mean, Itisha, that's an interesting example, but I think has it reduced the waste generation, because everybody has carried down somebody's waste, so that might encourage people to not litter up there. That would be good sustainable solution then. But I'm more into this whole organic waste management space. Plastic waste, I feel the focus should be minimizing the waste in the first place, and for that more funding and policy support is needed for R&D to replace plastic packaging, because right now there is a ban on that plastic carry bag, but nobody looks at the things that are purchased and brought home in that carry bag. Everything is wrapped in plastic. So unless there is an incentive for replacing plastic packaging, we will be left with this problem of how to deal with plastic waste. So I feel that at a very fundamental level, the ban should be on production of plastic packaging materials and single-use plastic bags rather than just use of it. So that would be my strong recommendation. As far as organic waste is concerned, composting is the most popular thing, but there are a couple of other options. One is biogas generation, which particularly works well for food waste and even agricultural produce waste as well as cooked food waste. Because if it has high food calories, then bacteria also convert it into energy very efficiently, and then it becomes there is an economic incentive because you can sell the gas to somebody or use the gas to replace a fossil fuel. So because composting makes sense only for those people who are going to engage in using that compost directly, whereas everybody needs energy for cooking. And there are technologies where even in a single household you can have a biogas plant sitting in your, even in an apartment house, in a balcony you can put a biogas plant and at least cook one meal on biogas that you are generating. That's one possibility. The other possibility, which is biochar, which is not very popular as yet, although in the agriculture sector many farmers are now getting interested in this. This is primarily suitable, I mean, we see a whole lot of crop residue burning that is happening, and particularly in the winter season when pollution in Delhi goes up, this suddenly becomes a talking point that agricultural crop residue is being burned, which means that there is more, and in winter your composting is also slowed down. So even if you are composting, the capacity is overcome, and you have excess waste, and there is no labor to deal with it, and the farmers find that the easiest way to deal with it is just to burn it off in open air. That kind of a low moisture, dry agricultural waste can be converted into char, and there are several technologies that are now available where without producing air pollution you can convert agricultural waste into char, and then that char can either go back into the soil, which becomes a carbon sequestration. I mean, it's the world's cheapest carbon capture and sequestration technology that anybody and everybody can implement. So that's another interesting spin around this. But we have also used this biochar to make some sellable products. So there again, it becomes an economic, potentially income generating activity for local communities, that rather than allowing this waste to just burn off in open air, you can convert it into something which is sellable. So there are some of these options. So the main thing is, in waste management, first step has to be waste minimization, then waste segregation, and then the segregated waste should earn some income. I mean, newspaper waste nobody throws in dustbin, because you can sell off newspaper waste and get some money out of it, even if it is a small money. That creates enough incentive for people to segregate and keep aside newspaper waste or paper waste in general. So similarly, if every waste stream starts creating some kind of an income, then automatically there is an incentive for segregation and incentive for dealing with that waste in a scientific and efficient manner. In the process, particularly with organic waste, we end up creating several products which help in food production. So composting is obviously there. Biochar, when char goes back into the soil, it holds moisture. It increases porosity of the soil, which improves soil health by creating more space for soil bacteria. If you are generating biogas, what comes out as the spent slurry is an excellent organic fertilizer. So with organic waste, there is a direct linkage with land improving essentially the capacity of the soil to produce or increase the yield in agricultural systems.
Thank you, Dr. Priya, and especially highlighting this nexus is crucial for what our discussion is about. And would anybody else would like to add to this what Dr. Priya has mentioned?
I completely agree. I mean, reduction and management has to go hand in hand. Yeah, and we are also trying our best to motivate, empower, enable the communities to practically reduce the waste that they generate. Recently we had during the summer vacation, we conducted a month-long summer camp for the kids called the Eco Champs, where we, taught them how to make reusable bags from your old t-shirts and old clothes and all of that. So, yeah, definitely. And another big problem in waste management is the sanitary waste. So there there is no management solution only. Like there is no way to manage sanitary waste. It's just, you just have to burn, which is not at all ideal. So there we are trying very hard to do implement reduction strategies. So introducing them to sustainable menstruation alternatives like a cup or a reusable cloth pad is what we are now introducing in the community. So yeah, definitely reduction.
I think, I would like to highlight that while this government initiative is yet to see the fruits of its intention, but the National Bamboo Mission over the last I think 2 years ago, revised itself to focus on value chain development. So the National Bamboo Mission, I think, started 10 years ago, where it focused on increasing production, but it slowly realized that was not possible. So now you're slowly seeing more bamboo, which is a much more sustainable material, both being used in construction and packaging. In the urban settings, especially little more elite urban settings, you're seeing more bamboo companies producing everything from toilet paper to packaging to food packaging, etc. So I think, there is definitely that to be explored in these areas where it can be used as an alternative to plastic and it's naturally biodegradable. So those are some trends we are also seeing as bamboo as alternative material. However, the cost still remains an issue, so that still needs to come down.
I remembered something when you mentioned bamboo. I'll just share this also. So for reduction efforts, what we are also trying to do is we are trying to research on, like, I am working currently with the Monpa community, the Monpa tribe. So we are also parallelly doing a research on identifying what were the traditional zero waste practices of a Monpa ancestor. Like everything they did in their daily life was anyway zero waste. So we are trying to, research on that through community participation, involving the kids. And then the idea is to then explore that, if we can have possible interventions where we reimagine with the community if some practices could be brought back, or if some practices can be reimagined, adapting to the modern contexts. They had such beautiful practices. For example, so they have their Monpa Jhola. Everyone has their Monpa Jhola. Earlier, everyone would use it, but now they are using other kinds of bags and, of course, plastic bag. But earlier, an ancestor in the Monpa tribe would have their Monpa Jhola, which is a cloth bag, a hand woven, and there they would have it's called a shingorbu. It is a bowl, a wooden bowl with a lid, so that they carry everywhere. And so the bowl is used to have rice or whatever, and the lid is used for the accompaniment. And so they eat it and they lick it and put it back in their bag. So there are still some oldies in the village who still continue to follow these practices. So this is something that we're also exploring, like how to make the community take pride in the practices they already had, and if those could be revived to reduce waste.
Amazing. And I think this perfectly sets for the context for the next question, because we're going to bring in like a very sort of an intersection between all of your expertise in the space. So talking about whatever we've gone through, so how can the cross-sectional collaboration between policymakers, conservationists, and local communities better support sustainable land management practices? And from these, like, what are the key factors for a successful collaboration? So I leave this open to the whole panel. Y'all can go ahead And I think because this really brings into the context of each and every one of y'all for your work over here. Yeah.
Should I go? Is it okay if I go first?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
Sure, thank you. So what I will do is I'll focus on the policymaker bit since my focus has been on policy research. So I think it's critical. So in terms of working with conservationists and local communities in the context of SLM, sustainable land management, I think it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's about really improving the governance of our lands, right? So currently, the reason why agroforestry and practice like permaculture have not been able to scale, or any practice that require a longer period of commitment to that land, is basically because of lack of land tenure security and land rights. So often what happens, if you see in India, the most number of cases stuck in courts are land cases, and that is because of there's a lack of clarity in the ownership of lands, especially in rural areas, and especially in what they call commons. So every farmer has their own land, and there are some areas which are common and which are often subject to overgrazing and other unsustainable practices. So I think strengthening that through what the government has recently, in the budget, if you saw, there's something called the DLIP, digitization of land identification parcels. So every farmer is going to be given like an Aadhaar ID, a DLIP. While that has been on paper almost since the last 8-10 years, only like 3% of our land has actually been identified digitally. So that really needs to be expedited, so that once a farmer or any tribal person wants to enforce the rights and wants to really conserve the land, they have the ownership to do it. So that is a critical challenge that policy needs to solve right now. Additionally, I think what we policy really needs to do is aligning sustainable land management systems and practices to achieve national and international commitments that we've made. So India is on the what we call the Bond Challenge, which is to restore 26 million hectares of degraded land. And how can that be achieved through these sustainable land practices needs to be really put into the mainstream policy making. And another important thing is, I think policy needs to work across. So India has a lot of individual missions like the Green India Mission, National Afforesty Program, and program to combat desertification. But these are held by individual ministries or by individual departments. But there is no what do you call expansive land management policy for the entire country. So headed by and worked across ministries. So and ideally, a land management policy needs to have the revenue department, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, as well as your panchayats at the local level, who and the district planning committee, or the panchayat planning committee, who creates a plan for district development for the next year, needs to have sustainable land management practices included in it, which currently is not there. There are individual missions, but they often come in contention with each other, or they just get failed to be implemented. So that is critical from a policy point of view that needs to happen. And finally, I think, as I mentioned, we need to leverage technology to improve monitoring, reclassification, and expedite digitization of land records. I think in the agenda it was shared that often grasslands and wetlands get categorized as wastelands, and that is most detrimental to all your efforts to improve land management. So that is from a policy point of view what needs to happen. Some key factors that I feel that are successful for any collaboration, and especially in the context of land management, is that we've seen. So I've worked. CW has formed and been part of many coalitions, some of which have been very successful. I think clear alignment on vision and outcomes, especially including key partners. So, for example, if you're trying to do a system transformation, any type of intervention which goes against the interests of a particular stakeholder, which is sufficiently powerful, it may prevent the transformation. So, I mean, taking an example from, say, food, if you're trying to reduce salt and sugar in the processed food, and not including food processing companies in that coalition, is never going to be effective. So similarly, who are the interested parties who may be getting negatively affected by these land management practices need to be involved in these coalitions. And finally, I think there has to be a significant mutual benefit for all the parties involved, and in any successful partnership. So those are some things I think are critically needed to create successful coalitions or partnerships to scale these practices.
I totally agree with Karan, especially this whole issue of every department and every ministry working in its own silo, and I mean, egos of the officials in charge is also another factor which plays a role there, which prevents cross fertilization of ideas and integration of policy initiatives, which is the core root cause of a lot of governance issues, including this one. I mean, the ministries and departments who are looking at land management or agriculture are totally different from those who are interested in pollution and waste management. Unfortunately, this division or this silos are not limited only to policymakers, but also to organizations and individuals working in these sectors, which makes this even a bigger problem. So, for example, those who are experts in waste management may not even be thinking about land and agricultural issues, and vice versa. And that also prevents a lot of innovative solutions from actually happening. So it sort of percolates around this whole compartmentalization of expertise, even among the solution providers, which then compounds the problem of compartmentalization of policies. There are also other issues which are sort of challenging in this whole thing, and that some of this is also related to pseudo scientific beliefs or wrong ideas that have been sort of carried forward, unscientific ideas that have been carried forward more from emotional perspective and so on. So just to give one example, this whole idea of replacement forestation is total nonsense. I mean, you cut down forests in Nicobar and replacement forest happening in Aravali's is just, it just doesn't make any sense at all. And then this whole idea that you plant billions of trees anywhere and everywhere, and that is sort of restoring environmental balance, is also another misplaced idea which totally ignores, as Karan has been pointing out, that grasslands, wetlands, other ecological systems also have a role to play in maintaining the planet's health. It's not just about trees and trees and trees everywhere. So some of these misconceptions also have to be addressed. And in the civil society, there seems to be an aversion for technology, and I mean, there are many people who feel that sustainable agriculture means you have to go back to traditional practices. That's not really the right approach. You have to find the right blend of what has worked over the years and what new science and technology is bringing for us, and find a way forward which is a new pathway, in a sense. So thinking outside these boxes and shedding these notions which have sort of just been carried forward without any scientific basis, that is also, I feel, an important sort of unlearning and relearning that everyone has to do, particularly in the context of climate change. I mean, we have to remember that the current environmental conditions that we are facing and what we are going to face in the future have similar conditions existed on planet Earth before humans evolved on planet. So none of our ancestors have faced these conditions. So the experience of our ancestors is of limited use for us to deal with these totally new conditions. That's something that we have to understand and embrace new knowledge, and try and find a blend of traditions and modern technology to move forward.
To my response to this question, I was thinking of it at the grassroots level. So at a rural level, if I look at again, going back to the idea of sustainable land management by preventing waste dumping. So at a rural level, who are your policymakers? The Gram Panchayat is your policymaker. So if I look, and so if the policymakers the Gram Panchayat, then your conservationist, let's say us as the NGO, and then of course the local community. So so what I feel, I mean, the factor for such a successful collaboration, I think it then becomes co-designing. Like if I, as an outsider, as a conservationist, come and try and come to the community and try to impose something, I don't think this would work. So in terms of creating successful waste management systems that leads to sustainable land management at rural level, where the policymakers are your gram panchayat members, I think it is very important to co-design with your gram panchayat members and your local community members, and and this, I think, this is the key, I feel, to the model that is working today in Sangti successfully, because as an outsider, I don't know about the culture, I don't know about the dynamics. So the co-designing has really helped us come up with an innovative model that has integrated culture. So to give an example, like the community-led waste management system, so the Gram Panchayat, with the help of us and the community members, was able to draft the bylaws, the waste management bylaws for the village. So yes, there is the policy, the solid waste management rules, the plastic waste management rules by the government, and then at the urban local body level also, you're supposed to make bylaws, but they don't do it, and that's again where, I mean, that's something that needs to be done. I mean, if you create your bylaws, you can have problems, you can have better solutions to your problems at the local level. So, but yeah, this is what we attempted at the rural level in the Gram Panchayat that we are working in.
Okay, I think then we can maybe when she gets back, then we can have her continue. And so yes, and I mean, this shows a perfect collaboration that you have mentioned, and this also, now finally, this adds context to our final question, to you, the panelists here. This question is that in what ways can we enhance targeted education, skill development opportunities, and capacity building efforts to empower these communities to take on more impactful roles in sustainable land management? So what would you all suggest in terms of these measures? So I think Itisha, we have Itisha back again. Yes, Itisha, would you like to continue from where you left off? I think we missed you halfway. Itisha, I think you're on mute right now.
I'm so sorry. Like, I'm in the town now, but still the internet goes up and down. Really sorry about that. So yeah, I was basically trying to make this point that the Northeast India, that houses a significant portion of the tribal population of the country, there is the scope to co-design community-led waste management models to preserve land in these ecologically fragile mountain ecosystems. So in the case of Sangti, we try to integrate culture in the waste management bylaws that was made for the village, in collaboration with the Gram Panchayat as policymakers and the local community. So how we integrated culture was, so of course, after having learned about the cultural observances that they follow in a month, so they have 4 holy days where they are supposed to abstain from any sinful activity. Now, sinful activity also includes farming, because when you farm, you are causing harm to some insect or some living being. So you're supposed to refrain from that. So then we leverage these days, which are supposed to be basti bands, to do waste management activities. So now on the different basti bands, like the 8th of every month, according to the Tibetan lunar calendar, the 8th of every month, the 15th, which is full moon, 30th new moon. These are days where different waste activities happen, like a monthly cleanup on the 8th, waste segregation and collection on the 15th, and similarly waste collection and segregation on the 30th. So because the government is not doing anything about waste management in the villages, and the problem of waste management in villages is only increasing. So then how can we get this done? Can the community then take ownership? So in a conventional like waste management system, your sustainability of the waste management model is equated with revenue generation. So sale of recyclables and user fees will help you sustain the model, and wherever the model is not being sustained, you have the government coming in, the CSR coming in to fund the gap. However, here what we are trying to do is, like, can sustainability of the system be ensured through community ownership? And that's what we are trying to do, I feel. And and because tribal societies have, tribals have known to be stewards of environment conservation worldwide. We have got so many examples, but we don't have much examples in the waste management field. That's because waste management is something very new to them and something they are very unfamiliar with. So that's where we come in to help them, co-design such a model that the roots of which lie in the community living practices. And because they have very strong traditional local governance systems, it is then just about, putting waste management into those traditional local governance systems.
Thank you so much, Atisha. And I think, for the next question that we were going to go into, I think you've actually covered a lot about it already. But then I'll still pitch it forward if, Atisha, you would like to add anything to this upcoming question, and plus it's open to the other panelists. So the final question, summing up whatever we've discussed, is that in what ways can we enhance targeted education, skill development opportunities, and even capacity building efforts to empower these communities to take on a more impactful role in these sustainable land management initiatives?
Targeted education. So what we are also exploring here is like in rural village, I mean, these government schools, they all need to run eco clubs, but it's something what we have seen here in across villages here. It's something on paper. It is practically these eco clubs don't even exist. So we are trying to do our best to tie up with schools and activating these eco clubs. So, and through activity-based learning, introduce environmental education. So that's one. And with regards to capacity building, we are also exploring now that we have been able to successfully integrate the self-help group women who are segregating waste and sending it out for recycling. We are also exploring if we can build their capacity so that they are also able to make products out of waste at the village level. Something that is again important because you do not have a recycling market for a wide range of waste materials. So that's another thing. And here I would also like to, I think, talk about an effort that an initiative that we started in collaboration with TD Forest Garden, where we tried to come up with a course. It's called Introduction to Permaculture and Natural Living, where we tried to combine waste management, permaculture. In fact, use permaculture as a lens to view waste management. And so since then, the course has really picked up. Now, the last, I think, 5 or 6 batches have done this course. Courses like these for the youth, and also for not just urban youth but also for rural youth. We have sent teams from the remote communities here to TD Forest Garden in Darjeeling, where permaculture was introduced to them as Purkho culture, so that they could relate to it more. And then, of course, the permaculture design certificate courses, I think, will help a lot in promoting sustainable land management initiatives. Now that I've mentioned TD Forest Garden, I would also like to touch a bit about regenerative tourism programs and how I think if we can introduce this whole idea of regenerative tourism to the rural communities of mountain villages, where a lot of waste is because of tourism, that now it's not just about sustainable, it is about taking steps to leave a place better than what it was before. So I mean, TD Forest Garden, I think, is doing a brilliant job when it comes to regenerative tourism. Like and I'm sure a lot of other permaculture farms are doing the same. So from like permaculture itself, like practically implementing permaculture in their farm. So TD Forest Garden, where it is located, used to be a garbage dumping ground. So they, with a lot of volunteers from different places, they removed some hundreds and hundreds of kgs of waste, and now it is a thriving food forest based on permaculture principles. So that's where they started. That's where they started from, and then they, to sustain themselves, they built natural buildings, and then they also are, so all within the umbrella of regenerative tourism. So they only have natural buildings. They follow permaculture, grow their own food, serve local food to the tourists. Tourists can come, volunteer, learn permaculture, learn natural buildings. Then they've also now started working with the villages, neighboring villages, where they are converting those villages into zero waste villages by working with the communities. Then then they are also working with the communities, again, nearby communities who are migrating, and migrating and leaving their land, and he's introduced things like the yakon syrup. So yakon, the ground apple, which is a superfood and needs very less care. So when he introduced this as a livelihood option, so the communities, the migration rates went down. They found a sustainable livelihood opportunity. So he's integrated all of TD Forest Garden has integrated all of this in their regenerative tourism model, where they have a eco store where things like the yakon syrup made by the community, locally grown yakon converted into yakon syrup completely naturally, and then in the eco store it is sold, and the tourists come and buy. They can also come and learn how to make these things. So and yeah, where I started from, basically these programs, they teach the youth all of this, in fact, even how to make yakon syrup, and like examples of how you can develop a regenerative tourism model. So yeah, few thoughts on this.
I just want to add one thing here, and this is based on my own experience, which is more in the sort of urban, peri-urban, rural connect, rather than remote villages or tribal populations. In this kind of because India is so rapidly urbanizing, it's the urban policies or urban lifestyles which create aspirations in rural areas. So I feel that the land management education needs to also happen in urban setting. Just to highlight one example, all the farmers around our urban centers are facing a big challenge, because the urban wastewater is flowing directly into the rivers, and it is this water which the farmers have to use for agriculture, and that is contaminating their lands. The solution therefore needs to happen in the cities, where wastewater has to be 100% treated, to ensure that the waterways are the sanctity of the quality of water has to be maintained in flowing rivers and lakes and so on. So also this whole epidemic of plastic packaged goods, where has it come from? It is more aspirational rather than anything else. So I think there has to be focus on educating urban communities as much as focus on educating rural communities, because the origin of the problem is in urban areas. So I feel very uncomfortable that I'm living in a city and then I am talking about going to the village and educating people, etc., etc. It has to be sort of collectively co-creating solutions which will address issues both in urban and rural areas, and collectively trying to implement those solutions. That has to be the approach. The only thing that perhaps an expert solution provider is bringing in is some scientific technological knowledge of how these linkages are operating. But it has to be more of a sharing of information and co-creating solutions approach, rather than educating or skill building or whatever.
Thank you. I mean, very correctly pointed out, Yatisha and Dr. Priya. Also, Karan, would you like to add anything?
No, I think they've covered it pretty well. And just wanted to second Tisha's point on integrating culture into any kind of educational training programs becomes critical for them to, one, for it to become relatable, and two, for it to become implementable. And both, even in the, I think even in the urban context, that becomes critical. And I think one thing that we need to do look at is behavioral theories that are further incentivizing or keeping the current system in place, right? Whether it is social accountability, whether it is negative loss aversion. So there are these common concepts which are used in behavior change that need to be integrated into these educational programs. So if, for example, a residents welfare association in a urban community takes like waste management into their own hands and holds their citizens accountable, that becomes an easier way to implement that at scale across all RWAs. Similarly, loss aversion means, okay, if I don't do this, then what can be the possible loss to me, and create fixing those biases in people's minds becomes critical than just the technical knowledge. So most people may be listening to this webinar know that waste management is important, but what's preventing them to segregate it at home? And really doing the research to understand what are the behavioral biases that are at play, and unlocking those becomes critical to really making that education implementable.
Thank you. Thank you, Karan. Thank you all panelists. And I would now like to move on to the question answers with the audience. There's a couple of questions that the audience would like to ask our panelists here. So if you could see, the first question that's asked is, even if we shift to recycling and reusing the waste generated, we can only delay the process of the waste being ending up in the dumping grounds once the recycle reuse are worn out. What are your opinions on the future of India on the energy and nutrient recovery from municipal solid waste? Would anyone like to take this up here?
Yeah, I can sort of attempt that, and that is exactly why I was saying that the most important step has to be waste minimization, because recycling or even repurposing, ultimately the plastic will disintegrate, and that is going to compound the problem. Because if I'm throwing the lid of a water bottle out, then the chances of it being found by somebody who is picking up the waste and taking it away are higher than if it disintegrates into microplastic particles, and then it gets sort of then it becomes part of the natural ecosystem, which is what is going to happen once these objects made out of plastic lids do reach their end of life and disintegrate. So we are just sort of pushing the problem ahead and making it more serious. So waste minimization has to be the strategy as far as inorganic waste is concerned. In the case of organic waste, it is relatively easier. Of course, that does not justify creating a huge amount of organic waste either, but it is an easier waste to deal with, because organic waste becomes part of the natural carbon cycle, and the ecosystem will reabsorb it and reuse everything that is part of it. But where it comes to plastics, metals also, several metals are recyclable, and those should be. So for example, in Pune city where I am based, there is a movement that has been started where all these plastic tiffin carriers which kids have in schools, so school principals are being convinced to ban plastic bottles and plastic tiffins, and replace that with steel bottles and steel dabbas, because you can it lasts longer, and you can recycle metallic components. So there are these kind of interesting movements which then also make minimizing waste and replacing these problematic materials with easier materials to actually keep on recycling indefinite, make it a trendy thing, make it a sign of being progressive, and using all sorts of advertising techniques to make that happen. All of these are also strategies that one has to use. But it is very true that recycling, it is energy intensive also in many cases, and repurposing or upcycling is also a very temporary kind of a solution. There is an interesting experiment where you can try and recover petrol from plastic waste, but the fuel that is produced is not of a very high quality, and can be used in very limited ways. So that is also not really a very permanent or sustainable kind of a solution. The only sustainable solution is how do we actually stop using materials which are going to create these problems, find alternatives for them, and therefore R&D and policies that has to focus on this waste minimization.
Yeah, I'd like to completely second ma'am on this. I mean, if we go back to the first things that we learn about waste management, the 3 R's. The first R is always reduce, and the last is recycle. Definitely. But then, but what do we do with all the waste that's there? So coming back to his question, like, what do we do with the waste? If I am asked whether you should, because we have mountains of waste that's lying. Yes, it is that should be a reminder for us to reduce our waste. But what do we do with the mountains of waste that's lying? Should we recycle, repurpose, or should we try to recover energy? If that is the question, then my answer to that would be recycle and repurpose, and not try to recover energy, because this whole thing about waste to energy or this is all, I think, it's again it's linear economy. The whole idea is based on linear economy, extractive linear economy, and not a circular economy. And all these technologies of waste to energy, like waste to energy based on incineration, they are highly inefficient, and they just make a problem that was less complex more complex now. Like earlier, it was waste in domestic form in your solid waste. Now you are making it much more toxic. Like once you incinerate, the toxic ash that is left behind, it pollutes your soil, your water, your air, and the energy that they claim, that is the electricity that they claim to produce, is very, very minimum. And the cost to set up such a system and to run such a system is highly cost intensive. And the worst part of waste to energy plants is that they release 68% more greenhouse gas emissions per unit of energy as compared to coal plants. So that would be my take on waste to energy.
Thank you, Dr. Priya, and thank you, Itisha, for this. I would like to go on to the next question then. The next question is, how can sustainable land management practices be scaled up to meet the growing demand for food and resources?
I can give that a shot. So I think one is that from a policy point of view, if you look at our policies, most food policies designed by Ministry of Agriculture are rooted in a certain belief system, which is yield as the goal of everything that we want to work on, right? While yield is critical to ensure food security, it is not the only thing we need to look at. Slightly reorienting that to think of things like nutrition per hectare created, or least amount of fertilizer used per calorie, or least amount of water used per calorie created, suddenly changes how policymakers can think about the policies we designed. And that what will happen is, as soon as we start thinking from that mindset, inherently we will incentivize more sustainable land management practices. And that is one critical shift in the mindset that is needed in anyone designing any intervention, or especially in the field of SLM. Second thing is I think it's not about, there is a slight terminology difference that I would like to highlight here: scale up versus scale out. So scale up is essentially when you take one practice, you scale up the same thing across everywhere, which I do not think in any food system in the world, especially India, given its diversity, should be scaled up. I think I've only learned from Itisha and Dr. Priya about how different cultural nuances can be taken to scale different practices. So it's about, I think, learning best practices and reapplying them or reimagining them in different contexts to scale out those practices. So it's not about having two or three best practices that are prevalent across India, but we have hundred of them, but they're all very, very context specific and useful for those that community or that area. I think that is one way that we can really scale up or scale out sustainable land practices while also meeting food and resource needs. I'm not saying that you replace an agricultural village with a forest, but how can you create a food forest that suffices the community food for the community as well as creates surplus of local and seasonal produce that can be sold to the nearby peri-urban and urban areas. While at the same time, all of this that I've been speaking about is from a production point of view. And I think because the design of the panel today is on land management, we have to make sure that if you're talking about land management from a food point of view, till we don't change our diets and till we don't change how our food reaches us, these interventions will either be limited to the amount of funding they have or soon die out because of lack of interest or lack of markets. So till markets don't support these land and waste management practices, and therefore there are no economic incentives, these practices cannot be scaled up. So I think making it aspirational, as you said, making it trendy, it becomes critical for these management practices to be scaled up. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add one point here, and that is we need to increase the diversity in our food. We are currently putting a lot of pressure on just a handful of plant and animal products. If we start eating a variety, I mean, there are millions of plant species, but we eat only a few of those. I'm sure there must be many other edible things out there which we haven't yet tried. So if we expand our food basket, that's also one way of putting less pressure on just a few species. So that's also something to think about in this context of food security. And I totally agree with what Karan said. I think the one of the basic rules of sustainability is to give up on this idea of scaling up everything. We have to align with our local ecosystems, not just in the context of food, but in the context of lifestyles, in the context of all sorts of resources that we use. Whatever is available locally, how do we build a respectable quality of life for everyone within that ecosystem? That is the overarching goal of sustainability. So the basic principles may remain the same, but the solutions are going to look totally different in different parts of India. It will not be scaling up, but more of replicating the basic framework, but creating I mean, diversity is the basis of our national identity. That is something which is going to happen if we really move in the direction of sustainability. In every ecosystem in India, we will see something totally different, but it is aligned with the local resource base, and the consumption then matches with the available resource base. That's the direction we have to start.
Thank you to Karan and Dr. Priya. And I think we are almost up with time. So I think if there are no further questions, I would like to wrap this up. And so we have come to the end of our panel discussion. And I would like to say I've thoroughly enjoyed this panel discussion with our three speakers here. And I bet the audience has enjoyed it as well. I mean, brilliant perspective from a policy and research angle, as well as having a really deep grassroots understanding in this conversation has been, I think, the highlight. And what our speakers have elaborated can clearly speak about the need for how land management practices, including sustainable food systems as well as the waste management practices, is critical in the need of the hour, particularly having a co-designing aspect of bringing in grassroots communities and bringing in from a higher up top-down approach to even like a bottom-up approach in that space. And also, yes, I think Karan has mentioned a few pointers in the chat. So if the audience would like to go through them, that would be great. And yes, I would like to thank our panelists again for this wonderful session. And I would like to hand over now to Nayanika for the concluding note. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Dear speakers, on behalf of the Balipara Foundation, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you for giving us your time, for joining this session and bringing in such a diverse set of perspectives, insight, and so many case stories from your field experiences. And I think it has added a lot to the session today, like in terms of knowledge, and it inspires youth like me to sort of take this up with even more positivity and motivation. Special thanks would go to our moderator today, Uday. Thank you so much for the very skillful moderation and for the coordination that you have been doing with me in the last 2 days for this. And we've always talked about conservation, but mostly from the perspective of biodiversity and forestry. But to be able to talk about it from the critical purview of waste and land management, I think that has been the highlight. Thank you so much again for your perspectives on this. But before I wind up, I would like to thank my team at Balipara Foundation, Karishma, Tanuj, Michael, and Rabijita for your inputs, your recommendations, and for helping me shape this up. So with this, the dialogues for this season ends. We have had 6 sessions, and this one was the final one. And so they say like it all is well when it ends well. So this has been like an end on a very, very positive note. And thank you again. And I hope to see you in the next season again next year. And I'll share the report with all of you very soon. Thank you. With this, I close the discussion today.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.